Good afternoon and welcome to Framingham Today. In our never-ending quest to bring pertinent, up-to-date information to you viewers, residents of the town of Framingham, we have hit upon a very interesting subject, actually a very passionate, emotional subject, the subject of Save the Sudbury River. And it's going to be our pleasure today to bring you a plethora of information about what is going on with the EPA decision to cap the Sudbury River on the, actually on the Ashland line with sand. And it might not mean much to a lot of you people, but boy, there's some people very passionate on the banks of the Sudbury River. It kind of I look out here in the Sudbury River, and it almost looks like you're up in New Hampshire and Lake Winnipesaukee or something, but it's right on the edge of Framingham and literally around the corner from Ashland. And joining me will be several people to talk about the subject, but initially I want to welcome Chairman of the Board of Selectmen Dennis Giambetti, my close friend who has come here, a lifelong resident of basically the area, and skated, I guess, was it here that you skated, Dennis? Skated here with the Glover family, and the Glover family has allowed us to do this show in their backyard, and we're very appreciative for that. And Dennis, welcome to Framingham Today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Barry. It's a very important topic.
It's an interesting topic, Dennis, that is capturing the headlines here and there, and you have some very passionate people, obviously. The irony of it is some of the, quote, noise that has been created and the interest been created by two women who don't live in Framingham. They're on 4 houses away from Framingham on the Ashland border. But the subject came up to you guys at the Board of Selectmen, and I know you took a vote on it about whether you support the EPA's decision or not. But before we get into that, there's a history that you probably can bring to the viewers of Framingham through your long association of just being in this area and knowing, I guess, starting with the Nyanza site and going from there. Would you kindly share that with us?
Sure.
Dan?
I mean, it has been a long-standing issue in Ashland and Framingham. It started really in the 50s, where a company in Ashland was a chemical company, and they were disposing of their chemicals in a not the best way. And it came to light over the years. In fact, I had some family members who worked at that chemical site, and I listened to their children talk about some of the stories of their parents coming home for lunch and having dust all over them. So it was something that was very, very dangerous, and a lot of workers suffered and received cancer because of that chemical, the way that it was handled. But it really became a light in the late 70s, early 80s when the Superfund was created. And the Superfund in their analysis depicted Nyanza in Ashland as one of the top sites in the country. And they spent a lot of money in Ashland cleaning up that chemical plant that I just mentioned.
So it became in the spotlight, really.
Became in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And being downstream of that and close to the Sudbury River, the plumes moved some of the mercury and other chemicals and got into the Sudbury River, and now we're downstream. And now we have a mercury issue here that the EPA has been looking at for a number of years, trying to find a solution to that.
At one point, Dennis, I was told, a gentleman who's going to come on here, Greg McGuire, that this was a reservoir and did feed into either Chestnut Hill or Boston or something like that, and then it was retired. So at one point, because it's called Reservoir 2, but yet it's called the Sudbury River, and I was a little confused about that.
There's a series of reservoirs actually we have. This is one of the 3 or 4 reservoirs that we have in town that were, as the gentleman said, was the water supply for Boston until MWRA came in and they retired these reservoirs for that.
Does that tie into the aqueduct situation also? Like they've retired some of the aqueduct?
I suspect so, yes.
I
suspect so,
I interrupted you.
No, it's
Go
okay.
ahead.
So it's, like I said, it's been a long-standing history. Mercury has come downstream and has now in this reservoir as well as it is in downstream in Wayland, all the way to Wayland. They lessens over as you get further away from the Ashland site. But EPA has been looking at this for a number of years. The board has been following their activities, and there were several different options that the EPA looked at. The board was never comfortable with the option that they're going forward with, and that
Did
is
they come forward to you with these options? Is
Yes,
that
they
how
have.
this thing?
Well, over the course of time, we've been engaged with the EPA as they've done their analysis and they work through the different options. The town was very much engaged with EPA as well as the neighbors and how they were figuring out what that best solution was. And they looked at 4 or 5 options that they had, and they chose this one here. And as I said, the board was never comfortable with this option, and we've never supported it over the several years. And recently, the neighbors, as it came out to light, not only what the solution was going to be, but also the implementation of that solution and what the impact would be on this neighborhood is considerable. And that's when it came to light with the neighborhood, as 2 ladies that you mentioned, Mrs. Hunt and Mrs. Pepe, became active, engaged the neighborhood in such a way, and they came to a board selectmen meeting earlier this year and raised the issues and concerns that they have on how this is going to be implemented over a multi-year process and what really impact it will have for this neighborhood. And the board took that seriously, and we did our analysis, and just recently we voted unanimously to not support the EPA recommendation. We sent a letter to that effect.
The EPA recommendation, and I'll just highlight, and you can add if I forget some of the things, just bulletize it as it's an $11 million project. It will take a couple of years. They will have staging areas. They will have trucks coming in, I guess
25 trucks a day.
25, I guess somebody said every 12 minutes or something like that, trucks a day. And the bottom line is to put sand in here, 6 inches of sand, and I think they're going to do it in 2 installments, 3 inches and then 3 inches, to cap the mercury, I guess. And beside the noise factor, the disturbing the neighborhood factor, the Save the Sudbury River team has come up with many reasons why it probably doesn't even have to be done. I think one of the major elements that the EPA is putting forth is that you can't eat the fish. And there's a study that says only if you, usually these fish aren't eaten anyway, it's recreational fishing, catch and release. If you eat 12 fish a year, you it could have an effect. However, they say what you buy in the supermarket and what you catch out of the place probably have more. So they've really mounted a campaign.
The science has been questioned, no question.
Yeah,
yes. Yep.
mounted a campaign. Is that in essence? Did I hit most of the salient points?
I think, at least from the board's perspective, the letter that we sent in support of the neighborhood and in opposition to the EPA recommendation really had 3 tenets to it. One is that we did share the concern of EPA that there is a high concentration of mercury in our reservoir. That's not a good thing.
Right.
And
That's
so
a given.
We should recognize that. The second point was that not only they based their solution on the fish as you described it, but they talked about that if nothing was done, it would take about 80 years for the recovery of the reservoir to take place, where mercury would be lowered to an acceptable level.
This is even if they capped it? Or?
No, with no cap.
Without doing anything?
Without cap.
Okay,
With
nothing done.
With capping it, you probably have to wait 50 to 55 years. So this gains about 20 years, at least according to their science. We looked at that and we said, that's highly questionable given the significant impact to the neighborhood for that solution. It's a minimum benefit. And you talk about a $11 million cost to do that. The board felt very uncomfortable with that approach, even though, as I said, we do share a concern that there's mercury, high levels of concentration in the reservoir. But we're just not comfortable, really like the solution that they've come up with.
What would you like to share with us that I haven't asked you? if anything else, because I think we've encapsulated it very well, leading into bringing some of the people on that live in the neighborhood and are involved with the neighborhood. You also have a neighborhood that is I'm going to call it a veteran neighborhood, because people have lived here for many, many, many years in a nice, quiet, bucolic setting.
There's no question.
Pristine. I mean, you can't get any prettier than this. And rightfully so, they're not too thrilled about the prospects of what's going to happen.
No question. And it's all about the neighborhood. And this little neighborhood is a gem of Framingham. It really is. It's lovely, and it's been like this for a number of years. Even when I went to elementary school, I went to school with a lot of the kids that lived in this neighborhood. It's a wonderful, wonderful neighborhood, and I think the neighborhood is going to be significantly impacted by this in a negative way.
Other than the noise that they create, and I say that in a nice way, I don't say that, I say that more in the alerting people and exposure, etc.
I call it advocacy.
Right, the advocacy that they putting forth. How objectively do you curtail the EPA from doing this?
Well, I think one of the things that they haven't got their funding yet, and EPA has not got their funding yet, and one of the they'll be buying in a competitive environment for dollars to go to different projects. And the federal government, and even state government, tends to look at projects that don't have the controversy, that have all their ducks lined up, the local community, the residents and so forth are behind it. They tend to get funding where the more controversial ones come. They'll look at it and it becomes a little more difficult to get that funding. So we're hoping that at some point EPA does not get the funding.
And let's make it clear, this is a federal project, not a state project.
Purely federal dollars, yes.
Well, right now, today, they couldn't send a postcard.
No question about it.
We happen to be taping this on October 2nd, the day after the shutdown. Right. So right now, they certainly wouldn't be in play. But it is you can't assume anything. You have to make sure that you stay on top of it. And I know that our legislators are very much behind the neighborhood. I know that Senator Spilka has been involved with it.
Yes, we have. We met with Senator Spilka and the neighbors, and she's supporting the town's position. And I'm very proud of my board, actually, the Board of Selectmen, who really made a statement, I think a strong statement, in protection of our neighborhood.
Dennis, exactly what I wanted you to do. It's perfect. It sets the stage to talk to the neighbors, like I say, and the people who are passionate. I wanted to make sure that we at least laid out the pros and cons, the reasons why, and you've done it beautifully, and I appreciate your time.
Again, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. Thanks, Barry.
And we'll be back right after this message. Welcome back to Framingham Today. I'm Barry Bograd, and we are literally on the shores of the Sudbury River, also known as Reservoir 2. And the subject matter for today is Save the Sudbury River. And with me, a distinguished guest, Dr. Charles Ziegler, who is a resident of this area and also basically a scientist, an expert in many, many areas of the field of science, and has a interesting perspective on the particular situation of why he's involved with Save the Sudbury River. Dr. Ziegler, welcome to Framingham Today.
Thank you.
We've had an interesting discussion off camera, and you have some very interesting points. So you have studied the EPA decision and the reason why they want to cap the river, and maybe you can share that with our viewers, some of the thoughts that you have, and also a little bit of your background.
Well, my background in science involves, or did involve, the question of hazardous materials, just as the problem here is involved with the hazards posed by the amount of lead and mercury in the deposited in the silt of this reservoir. And so I'm familiar with the kind of language the EPA uses. I'm familiar with the notion of the maximum permissible levels and so on. In fact, I must say up front that I have no quarrel with the EPA as an agency. I think they're a very valuable and important part of our government system. And I think they have excellent scientists for the most part. However, in this case, I think that there are some real problems that make me feel that the proposal that they have for sand capping this reservoir are exactly, to say it this way, I would say it's more extreme than it need to be to take care of the hazard that exists there.
It's an $11 million project.
Yeah, 11 million bucks, and the I know that the list that the government made up years ago includes this as part of the sites to be fixed up. However, it seems to me that there are many sites in Massachusetts even that are much more of a problem than this. This really does not pose a real problem as it stands. Nature has taken largely in charge of the situation and modified it to the extent that there are no hazards really from the existing levels that are in this particular spot.
You also mentioned that there are two federal agencies that are in play in this particular situation, and they are not quite in agreement as far as the levels from a standards standpoint. You might want to share that with us.
Well, that's a very important point because the Food and Drug Administration has levels for the food that we eat. And for example, in the case of fish, they have a certain level. The amount of mercury and lead should not exceed some number. That number is almost 2 or 3 times higher than the level that the EPA is using to assess the danger from eating fish from this lake, the reservoir rather. And I find this very disturbing.
So the FDA has a lower standard, the EPA has the higher.
Correct. The EPA makes the main point of their action the fact that people fish in this lake and they sometimes eat the fish. And they came up with some number that shows that if you eat 12 fish every day, that you will perhaps get a dangerous amount of lead or mercury in your system. Actually, of course, this was taken care of. I've lived here for 50 years, and this was taken care of when I first came here by signs all around the lake saying, do not eat the fish.
Right.
Now, at that time, there was, in fact, a level of mercury and lead that was potentially hazardous if you ate a lot of the fish. That is not true now anymore. The EPA's own data show that you could drink the water, walk on the silt, and swim in it, and
not be affected.
And not be affected. So the people that fish here could be warned that perhaps eating the fish here is not a good idea. In fact, all the fishermen that have been observed here lately
probably catch and release.
Yeah, exactly, will catch and release. They're really not interested in eating the fish. Now, this gets back to the other point. If you go to the supermarket and you get fish in a can, like tuna and things like that, you'll find that the amount of lead and mercury that the Food and Drug allows in that fish to be something like 2 or 3 times the amount that they're saying that the fish here would be. This seems to be a definite contradiction between two agencies as to what the permissible dose, permissible level is for this kind of contamination.
the bottom line is funding. And from what we understand, the permission is there, but there's another element, and a key element, and that is EPA attempting to get funding. And I guess you feel that the more information that gets out, the more exposure, the more I use noise that is in the system, then there'll be less opportunity for them to get funding. Is that the route? Is that the direction that this particular organization seems to be attempting to go?
Well, well, of course, I've spent a good part of my professional life working for the government,
right.
And so I am not innocent of the kind of political pressures that are brought on various scientists.
Sure.
I would not say that's the case here, but the point is that it's very disturbing to find that they seem to be using, in the case of the maximum permissible levels, say in the fish, a value that is contradicted by another government agency. That's already a sort of a signal flag that there may be something wrong here. But there are also the considerations that the amount of money that would be spent on this could be much better spent in cleaning up other places where the hazards are very real and very obvious, all right?
Interesting. Dr. Ziegler, thank you for sharing your information with us. Thank you for your expertise, and we appreciate you coming on to Framingham Today.
Okay, thank you.
Ground roots effort that has been building is focusing on trying to get the stopping funded. Get the funded stopping, excuse me. And yeah, that's the key at this stage. And the group has been working with local, state, and federal officials to try to get focus put on that. And you just mentioned the funding. One thing that's also sad to see is the original funding that was budgeted for the project. I guess the budget has increased fairly significantly over the years, due to inflation.
Yep.
Everything costs more than it did, a few years back. So it's even more money is being planned to be spent on something that's not adding value and is actually doing harm.
Well, we know from the big dig that 11 million will become 20 million or something like that.
Kind of disturbs me a little, as they're saying the fish is the problem.
Right.
Well, when they sand cap, they're only going to sand cap this section, which is the Fountain Street Bridge to that particular dam over here.
Yeah.
And what about the other side? All this came from Nyanza.
Right.
Now, don't the fish swim underneath that bridge? Don't they go across over there? What happens if someone fishes on that side? It's okay for them to eat the fish there and not this side? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So.
Dino, I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate your comments. They mean a lot for several reasons. Long-term resident, town employee, passionate about living on the river, and we hear the expression "not in my backyard," but I think it's going to be in your backyard if it happens, and it ain't pretty, as they say.
No, it isn't. Like I said, it's just a waste of taxpayers' money, and right now, it's tough.
The risks that are present from the mercury, in fact, the sole actionable risk that allow us to take an action is the risk from the consumption of mercury-contaminated fish. So if I turn that around, there's no, I want people to be aware, there's no unacceptable risk with contact with sediment, contact with surface water. We've modeled exposure of children, adolescents, and adults, assuming a recreational exposure of 150 days per year. incidental ingestion of surface water and sediment. The risk is really just from the consumption of contaminated fish. And we, in calculating our risks, we need to account for what would be a reasonable maximum number of fish meals a person would consume per year. And for our study, that was 12. And when you have a person that would consume that number of fish with the concentrations we measured from the river, that triggered an unacceptable risk. So that is the basis for the remedial action that without we wouldn't be having this discussion here tonight.
Welcome back to Framingham Today, and the subject du jour is Save the Sudbury River. And we have another neighbor with us to share her thoughts and wishes for what's going on and what will go on, and that's Linda DeCooney. Linda, welcome to Framingham Today, and welcome to a very important subject, especially for you people in the neighborhood. You live right around the corner from where we're taping, and I'm sure the potentiality of what could go on will affect you greatly. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this.
Well,
how'd you get involved?
I became involved when Laureen and Linda stopped by to let me know about the issue, and as I looked more into it and discussing it with neighbors and everything, came to realize how unnecessary it all is. All the evidence, even from the EPA themselves, points to that this is an empty project. It's not a project of substance that it will do more harm than good.
Yeah. And how long have you been kind of waving this flag, or being involved and got on board the train?
Well, since the beginning of this year.
Right. Have you guys, other than, I guess there were flyers and there have been some articles. There was an article in the Metro West Daily News, and we're doing this show. Have there been other either events or other marketing vehicles to let people know the problem of this? I mean, neighborhood meetings or anything like that, or?
There was one neighborhood meeting that I was not able to attend, but I did know about it. I just basically just being in touch with Laureen and Linda, and also on Facebook, just keeping updated and like that on that.
Does your street tie into the river at all, or are you a street or two away, or I mean, are you adjacent to the river? Or?
I'm not directly on the river myself, but my main concern is just the destruction of the nature and the whole ecosystem around us.
Right.
We have deer, we have wild turkeys, we have all types of wildlife that depend on this whole area to house them and like that. And you know, I have some bird feeders out to take, you know, to help with help that along.
Yeah. How long have you been living in the neighborhood?
14 years.
Yeah, so it's not like you just came here last week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it is, it's disturbing, I'm sure.
It is disturbing. I think the main thing that is disturbing to me is not only the destruction of the ecosystem, but also the EPA is not really forthcoming with when this project is exactly going to end. Also,
or begin.
When they don't want to commit to say when it really will end, how much it's $11+ million. Well,
Today,
are we going to have the big dig on the Sudbury River?
I just mentioned that to Greg McGuire, who was sitting here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do we really want that? And you know.
And what benefit?
At what benefit?
Yeah.
And after they finish with it, it will be over 55 years for everything to recover from what they've done. And there's also another question of one of the board members had researched sand capping that had been done in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
There's the issue of what is in that sand, and there was
that
an
creates
issue.
something else.
Well, there's an issue of they've found asbestos
Yeah.
in that sand. I mean, is the EPA going to be around when I have mesothelioma?
Yeah.
You know, it's just unnecessary. The science proves it, and there's so many other projects, I'm sure, that are worthwhile,
Right.
that need to be done, and this is not one of them.
Linda DeCooney, thank you for sharing.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. You did it very succinctly, and I know you got to get back to work.
I do.
Right. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Framingham Today. I'm Barry Bograd, and I guess we kind of can say we saved the best for last. Although we're delighted with all of our guests today, they really gave different kinds of views of the Save the Sudbury River concern, project, whatever. And but the final two guests here are really the glue that is keeping this particular subject all together. And I'm delighted to welcome Lorraine Hunt and Linda Pepe. And the interesting thing of all of this, and we're on the shore, we're in Framingham on the shores of the Sudbury River, Reservoir 2, is that these two women are not from Framingham. They're both Sudbury residents, but I think if I took a baseball from where we are here and fired it as far as I could fire it, it'd probably land in your yard. So are you that close to?
In the yard, we're 4 houses out of Framingham. If you threw that ball, you can't do that because you might hit one of the ducks that are swimming in our pool.
But somehow something turned you guys on, and something said to you, this ain't right.
Oh, yeah.
And you decided to take up the cause. You decided that, you know, I'm not going to sit here and let this happen without at least making sure that people understand what's going on. And I don't care who starts and I don't care who finishes, but between the two of you, if you can share with us how this all began and what steps you have taken to get a television show involved with it, newspapers involved with it, selectmen of Framingham involved with it. Somehow you have done a lot of legwork and talked to a ton of neighbors to be in the position that you are now. So whoever wants to start, it's up to you guys. We're going to get both of you on anyway. So.
If I can, I'd like to start and just take a step back. You mentioned that we live in Ashland. The reality is Lorena and I both moved here back in 1996 from New York City. And we had lived in the city, each of us, for about 17 years. So we really moved from what you could call the concrete jungle to the middle of paradise.
Literally in the city, or
Literally right in the middle of the city in Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why we're so passionate about this, because
This river changed our lives. The animal life here changed our lives.
Boy, you did make a major lifestyle change, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Coming from the city, I know the city well. I had lived in the city, but
And
I was 5, but that's okay.
That being the case, I think we have such an appreciation for Framingham and Ashland and the reservoir and just the beauty that's here, the nature that's here, the animals and the wildlife that's here. And that's why we felt so passionate about, once we found out about this EPA project, needing to do something about it.
We got a postcard in the mail, and this was in December.
Right.
And it really...
And how long ago was this?
December, this past December.
Oh, this past.
And there was not really any information on it. It just said, it gave a meeting date and time in Framingham Town Hall, and then there was a link to a PDF. Well, we followed that PDF, and we spent the entire weekend reading that PDF, because what that was the EPA's 1,621-page plan on sand capping this river. And we read through this, and none of it added up. And so we went to the meeting, and we both spoke passionately, I think,
Now, at the meeting, what was, quote unquote, what was the meeting?
The meeting
about?
was
Was it EPA presenting?
an EPA presentation by the project manager, Dan Keefe. And he was presenting and basically saying that there's no harm, the river is not dangerous. The only danger here at all is the possibility of eating 12 or more fish in a given year.
Right.
Yes. And then we've lived here since '96. We've spoken with we're out here all the time, and we've spoken with probably every angler out here. Everybody knows to catch and release. So they seem so adamant about this, and even when they went into you can drink the water, you can swim in the water, you can come in contact with the sediment of the river, because the channel that runs through here is basically where the mercury is settled. And it's very deep. The Nyanza project was capped in the 70s. It's been decades of naturally occurring silt burying this mercury. And then we got onto that, and we kept learning more and more. We started learning other things through their own literature. The fact that the mercury that's actually getting into the fish is predominantly coming from the atmosphere. So we're like, you're going to cap a river.
Nyanza.
No, it's not coming from Nyanza. Every fresh body of water in the entire Northeast, so like from New Jersey north up into Canada, has do not eat the fish advisories, the same that is on this particular body of water, and it's burning of fossil fuels, so are cars. It's also the majority of the coal burning smokestacks out in the Midwest. The wind drives it here. It winds up in our lakes and rivers and streams. And we're like trying to make sense of this and saying, well, if you sand cap this river, and yet then in the end, the mercury is mostly coming from the atmosphere,
it's still going to
you're still not going to be able to eat the fish. So spend millions of dollars, truck in 140,000 tons of sand, clear cutting acres of beautiful trees, and taking up 2, 3, 4 years. Once the project starts, like the big dig,
it discontinues.
It discontinues, exactly.
So you walked away from that meeting, and you said, something doesn't add up here.
Well, I actually told him he's not going to get away with it.
And we...
Gee, I thought of you as a shrinking violet, Lorraine. I didn't realize that you would come out with. So all right, so then you guys decided, we got to do something about this.
Exactly.
And then we had this horrible winter. But we went, and the neighbors will tell you, we went door to door to door to door to every
Who are
house
these wild
on
women
it.
who are knocking on our door?
People were welcoming us.
We were working while there were blizzards. I mean, it was snowy, but we knew we
but you
needed
get
to
to
get
know
the
your
word out.
neighbors.
We did.
Exactly.
We know so many people now, and it's such a, you know, we live in the community. You know, your neighbor's right by you. But coming around and meeting these people, I mean, you've met some of them today. I know them by name.
Right.
We've done so many things together. We make sure that they stay updated on
Keep
everything we do.
communicating,
Yeah, and we do that mostly through email. We also have a Facebook page, but we don't put a lot on our Facebook page at all times because the EPA is watching our Facebook
right,
page.
I'm sure they
So
are.
anything like that's going to come out that we're planning, we certainly don't announce
So
until it's
let's
done.
fast forward a little bit. So
Sure.
you've obviously you sent out some printed matter. You had a
Well, the flyer that you've
flyer,
seen.
right?
What
And
we
we-
did
and
was
we update
Can I
that.
take a minute? What
Yeah,
we
sure.
did was we knew. Lorena and I took the time to read that 1,621-page document, as well as there are plenty of other documents that are on the
There's
EPA
a
website.
700-page record of decision.
There are
and-
many documents that are. It's almost like you're being buried in paper. But we took the time to read that EPA's draft plan and distill it down to an easy to understand fact sheet. Just a 2-page one talking about the reason the EPA wanted to do it and the impact on the neighborhood, and the other talking about the very specifics of the plan.
Yeah, you did a great job because you know, in researching or at least trying to prepare for this program, you sent me some great information, and it was succinct. It was you know, one page and it's not rocket science.
And then every time we come upon
understand it anyway.
Yeah, and every time we come upon some new information, we make sure we get it and send it out to
Yeah,
everybody.
just add
Just like we sent out that information to you the other day, because we had a 3.5-hour meeting last week with
Right.
EPA. And
With that Dan
Keefe and a couple other people, their risk assessor. And what we find is that we asked them, you know, what kind of sampling you do with fish. Turns out they did 10 fish. And they
And
might have
computer modeling.
and maybe
And in
two
some
of
cases
this
less than 10
and
fish.
sometimes the fish weren't even from this body of water. They tested a lot of animals, but if they didn't find the animals that they were looking for here at the time or when they were
Found them
doing,
someplace else.
they went to Great Meadows.
For birds and
you
some of the
can't,
other.
you can't.
Yeah, it's
That's not
apples and oranges,
science.
yeah.
That's
Yes.
not science.
And a lot of that testing was done a decade or more ago
Yeah,
as well.
the testing of the fish was done a decade ago,
I-
and so have they? You know, a lot has changed. Mercury is even further buried.
It's
EPA has the go-ahead to do this other than the funding.
They don't have their funding,
Right.
and that's our job to make sure they don't get their
So
funding.
what's your game plan? What in you guys' mind, you know, everybody has, you know, I'm preparing for the next football game, so I have to have a game plan, and I have to scout the opposition, and I have to come up with an antidote, if you will. I got to be able to block them, if you will.
Well-
Where do you go
Well,
from here?
I would say, first of all, when we first started out, Lorena and I we were sort of appalled by the EPA's plan, and the first thing we did was sit down the very next morning and write a letter
Right.
and start sending out to some politicians. We realized pretty quickly that that wasn't enough,
Right.
and that we had to get the community behind us. So that's why we spent all that time in the middle of the winter going door to door. And one of the things that was so very telling was, as we were talking to people, people didn't know anything about this. The vast majority knew nothing about the EPA's plan, in spite of the EPA saying that they'd been keeping the community involved for years. And one of the questions we kept hearing over and over again from people is, well, why are they doing it? And we'd say, well, the EPA has determined that the one reason they can do it is because of recreational anglers. If an angler keeps and eats 12 fish in a year, there may be a danger.
So your big thing is to put signs around in a couple of languages.
And they have, and they have since
the
put
EPA's
multi-language signs out.
They've upped that. I think we need to do more, and there needs to be more education, but it would be so much smarter to educate people rather than create this, just destroy this beautiful environment.
But we've gone around, and every single people do fish here, but they don't keep the fish.
Yeah, they
know
catch
not
throw
to
it back.
eat. Right.
They throw it back.
Well, you know, the old thing, can you fight City Hall? I guess my question to you guys is, realistically, you know, just between us,
And all your viewers.
can you stop it?
Well,
Yes.
look at what we've done already.
I think
Yeah, you got me here.
We've gotten the community involved. We've gotten newspaper articles. We're having a TV show now. There'll be more media involvement. We've got about 150 signs up all across around the reservoir and other parts of Framingham.
Yeah, if you drive down Winter Street, they're all over the place.
That's right, and people are noticing, and the EPA is noticing, and the reality is...
You got support from the selectmen.
Exactly.
And
we have
Senator Spilka. And Senator Spilka has written to our to Senators Warren and to Senator Markey. Our next, we push on them.
And we have some of our other reps, like Santa Contra and Walsh behind us.
And other reps, the reps in the area are behind us.
And I want to make sure people are aware, learning that this is a federal project,
right,
not a state project.
No, this
so
is a federal. That's why we have to go. That's why we have to go to our people in Washington.
Try to influence.
Right.
And influence the Washington.
And if they see that, you know, the community, the signs were really important because it shows right away the solidarity in this community against the EPA plan. And then, you know, then people started looking, and then we started getting the articles, and we have more. You know, we got the wonderful meeting with the selectmen where they voted unanimously against this plan.
And we have Dennis on this program to support it, which is doesn't hurt, as they say.
I think the way that we stop the funding, it's already started, but we go to, from this point, we go to the stations, the television stations in Boston, the Boston Globe. We've had a big dig here. We've also, I mean, it's like there's so many things that people have seen that where it's wasteful government spending. And right now people have had it with the government wasting money on projects that are absolutely unnecessary. And we see this as something where we know they have no report of anyone becoming ill from eating the fish. They did research out here, but never even asked people if they ate the fish. We did, we asked them. And
I'm sure 99.9% said no.
Everyone said no.
Yeah.
And is there possibly some people fishing off the Fountain Street Bridge that might take some fish home? There might be. But then we find out, you know, from the EPA that we start talking about the fish, the levels of mercury. We start finding out about huge levels of mercury in fish in grocery stores. And then we have them and they say, well, we probably shouldn't tell you this. But then they tell us about, and this is something I sent to you too,
the
FDA allows over 3 times the amount of mercury to be sold in grocery stores and restaurants.
It's a whole different scale.
Then the EPA allows.
Standards.
And so what that means is if the fish from this reservoir were being sold in the grocery store,
it would be okay.
It would be totally safe.
Totally safe. And with knowing that, the EPA wants to spend over $11 million of taxpayer dollars.
And you know, if it starts at $11 million, it's going to go up.
You know what the big dig was. You know, the investigative reporters like Joe Shortsleeve and the guys like that on Channel 4 and I can't remember some of the others on the other stations. They do exposés and stuff. I would think that might be a very good subject matter for them, and they get things done. I mean, it's amazing how, because again, it gets spotlighted and stuff. So
public pressure, media pressure,
and the public here.
That's our next
The public
steps.
here is very passionate about stopping this. I mean, we all live in this. I mean, just look how majestic this is. Could you imagine barges out here, sand? I mean, just imagine over on the other side of the Fountain Street Bridge, clear cutting acres of trees, putting all that sand there. In the middle of the summer with sand blowing around, there are children with asthma, there are people, you know, adults with asthma, there's a lady that lives right there with them that has emphysema. I mean, that in itself is a danger. And they're thinking about bringing 5 trucks an hour to dump. You can't be dumping and not expecting, I mean, sand to be flying all over the place.
And one thing I'd really like to make clear, if there really was a danger, we'd be the first ones behind saying, yes, we need to do something. Yes, we need to protect the future, our children, the community. It needs to be protected. The reason we're so against this is it's completely unnecessary.
If people want to get involved with your cause, how do they get a hold of you?
They could email us. And our email is savethe-sudbury-river@gmail.com. It's on the signs too, people going around. We've been getting contacted a lot by people just reading off the signs.
Let me do that slowly. savethe-sudbury-river@gmail.com.
And they could also go to our, if they just go into their Facebook and look up Save the Sudbury River. We have a lot of information posted there. We even have videos of what sand capping would do, like actual sand capping projects on videos. And every time we have something major that comes up are like the letter that Senator Spilka wrote to the EPA, the letter that
You'll send it out.
that we posted, the letter that
from the Board of Selectmen.
that the Board of Selectmen wrote to the
Right.
EPA. They're very strong letters. They say in no uncertain terms that we and the people in the community, that the senator or the board, are against this, and for the EPA to come up with a plan that may, yes, monitor it here, monitor the mercury, but do something that will not destroy the environment. I mean, you can't say you're helping or you're protecting the environment if you're going to come in here and dump all this sand on top of the vegetation out here, on top of the animal life that's living in this river.
The organisms in the bottom of the riverbed as well.
We're coming to the end of the show, and I want to give you
Thank you so much for doing this.
But I want to give you each 1 minute each to say whatever you want to the viewers out there to support your cause.
No, why don't you go first?
All right. I think it comes down to a matter of practicality and what really matters and what's really important. This plan simply isn't necessary. The EPA's sole reason for putting this plan forward is potentially if a recreational fisherman or angler would eat 12 or more fish in a year, and that's just not happening. They haven't done they haven't done the studies. They haven't talked to people the way we're doing it, and everyone we've spoken to is catching and releasing. That's not happening. That versus clear-cutting trees, bringing in truckloads, 140,000 tons of sand, putting barges on the river, the potential health issues from the sand and the dust. It's just not worth the payoff in the end, because in reality, Mother Nature is taking care of this. Every year, more silt is going and burying that mercury under the riverbed, and it's not a danger.
Lorene?
And again, even if they did this plan, you still couldn't eat the fish because all the mercury coming from the atmosphere. And we're not going to stop driving cars, and the coal plants will still continue to send their poison into our lakes and rivers. So the plan makes no sense, because if you set out with a plan that says that we're going to make it safe, but then in the end you don't make it safe, and all you've done is great. You've created a project for yourself. You're going to get funding. You're going to keep your jobs, but you're going to destroy a beautiful, beautiful ecosystem, something that we all love. And to not even go out and do the research to see if anybody's eating the fish, or like a couple neighbors have said, well, with the money they're spending, why don't we just put somebody on the bridge all year, and they can say, hey, don't eat those fish.
Right, like a flagman or something like that. Lorene, Linda, thank you so much, and thank you for being passionate about it, because it's important that people, if they really feel strongly, not just lip service things, but take an active role. And the fact that you take an active role, I think we've seen in a lot of instances, sometimes you can fight City Hall and win.
And City Hall, by the way, is on our side.
Yeah, and City Hall is on your side. So again, we thank you and appreciate you being on, and appreciate you helping us set up this whole thing today. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Barry.
You're welcome. And we want to thank all of our guests here today. This has been a fascinating subject in a beautiful location on the shores of Sudbury River, also known as Reservoir 2. And it's a very important subject, not only to the local neighbors, but to all of us, as far as expenditures of taxpayer dollars, as far as disturbing the neighborhoods, as far as disturbing the vegetation and ecology. And I think it's something that at least I found out a heck of a lot more today by talking to all of these people. And we're very grateful to everybody for being on. I especially want to thank the crew led by Ron Rigo and Steve Innes. And Bill, give me the last name again. Mintzer. Bill Mintzer. And for everybody involved with Framingham Today, I'm Barry Bograd saying join us again real soon for another interesting Framingham program. Good day.